Good evening, my brothers and sisters. I have a long time coming for this story. Challenge has been made, so I'm going to go ahead and do it for you. I'm going to start with a little prayer. Heavenly Father, just thank you for this opportunity to come and share my story, Lord. I thank you for everything that I've been through to get to this point, Lord. I pray that you would shine your light on me, in me, and through me to those who are about to hear me. Let my words be your words, Lord, and let the message be known that change is possible. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. I'm a believer who struggles with identity, abandonment issues, sexual abuse, and codependency, recovering from many addictions including drugs and alcohol. My name is Johnny Joe. Most of my issues are rooted in a traumatic childhood and generational sin that was passed down to me from my parents. I grew up in a world where I was alone, felt different, and one that was full of secrets and lies. I was born in the late 60s when racial tensions were high. My dad was born in Mexico. He eventually went to school in Texas. He would eventually move to Michigan, where he met and married his wife. They had 3 kids, and one on the way when he met my mom, who became pregnant with me. There were also other women that were expecting at that time by my dad. This is where my identity issues began. I would be given my mother's maiden name and would never have a whole sibling, just half brothers and sisters. Never really fitting into either family. I didn't have a sense of belonging. I didn't fit in with the brown-skinned people and I wasn't brown enough. I didn't fit in with the white people because I wasn't white enough. Because my parents were never married, well-meaning people of society, including the church where we attended, called me a bastard child. This is what was spoken over me, and it would be that, or it would be what I began to believe of myself. Codependency began to filter into me. My dad never divorced due to his wife's values, so there weren't the usual parenting time arrangements. I would later learn that my dad was heavily involved with international drug smuggling. With that kind of lifestyle, I essentially grew up fatherless. There'd be random visits from him or with him, but rather and rarely, if ever, did I see him clean and sober. He did have a love for motorcycles, and I believe that's where I got my love of riding and wind therapy came from him. It is the one positive I did get from him. It would be my uncle on my mom's side who taught me, and as well as all my cousins, how to ride a motorcycle long before we even rode a bike. See, I was born to ride. We had an Indian 50 in our family that all the kids learned how to ride on. Not too many people can say their first bike was an Indian. Both parents abused drugs and alcohol and both spent time in jail. I didn't know anything different. It was the environment I grew up in and around. My mom was a single mom who worked to support us. And while she worked, I was in an in-home daycare. It'd be in daycare where my childhood and my power would be stolen from me at the age of 4. I was molested by the daycare provider's son more than once, and that continued for what seemed like forever for me. He'd not be the only male to abuse me in that manner. I had no clue that none of this was normal. I didn't have anywhere or anyone that was safe in my life. All the people, including our family and friends, were of the same dysfunctional, addicted circles, including those who cared for me while Mom was at work. I would spend the next 32 years seeking to gain my power back, seeking to control the uncontrollable in dangerous and violent ways. When your power is taken from you at a young age, you will seek to control everything in your life, because when you are in control, you feel safe. That is one of the biggest lies the illusion of control throws at you. Mom eventually took in my cousins when I was around 8 because of the trauma they were experiencing at home. They were my mom's sister's kids, and they too were biracial and fatherless. Here we were, 2 boys 8 years old and 3 teenage girls, and my mom in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. To say it was chaos would be an understatement. It was to each his own kind of environment, and modesty wasn't something anyone had time to practice. Being naked around each other was not uncommon. Unfortunately, it would be a female cousin who attempted to teach me all things sexual. And again, I fell victim to sexual abuse. That further stripped me of my own power, of being able to trust others, of knowing right from wrong, and would go on to destroy any concept of a healthy relationship with members of the opposite sex, because my boundaries were crossed, boundaries that I didn't know I could have. I learned to keep secrets at a very young age, and everything was so confusing to me. I just instinctively knew not to tell anyone about anything, because when or if you did, people would come and take you away and put you in a foster care. I kept it all in, and the older I got, the more difficult it became to hold it all in. You are as sick as your secrets, and I was living proof of that. My greatest childhood trauma happened when I was 10. My dad had gotten out of jail and was right back to his old life. He was riding drunk on his motorcycle with his helmet just sitting on his head, not strapped on. He was riding towards the house when a car pulled out in front of him. This happened in front of his kids. All I really remember from that day was how he looked at the hospital after open brain surgery, when he had huge staples that to a 10-year-old kid made him look like Frankenstein. It was horrible. That would be the last time I seen my dad, as he couldn't survive the injuries that he sustained. The funeral wasn't much better. His wife had the entire service in Spanish, which I couldn't understand. She wasn't too happy to have me or my mom there. My grandfather on my mom's side was so drunk he couldn't even stand. I thought this was all normal, and that this is what everyone experienced. More codependency developed. Don't talk, don't trust, and now don't feel. Not feeling became a relief, but was a harder thing to achieve as I got a little older, and the truth of my life became a hardened reality. I started drinking and smoking dope around the house. In the 7th grade, a friend of mine and I decided we were going to drink a fifth of whiskey in about a half an hour. We mixed it with warm RC. Still remember that. I don't remember much about the hangover or the 4 blocks walk home that day, other than what the neighbors had told my mom. Apparently I had stopped in every yard on the way home and puked, and the neighbors thought my mom ought to know. I was a blackout drinker from the very start. Eventually I spun way out of control, so my mom sent me to Texas to live with my dad's siblings, who would bounce me around from home to home. I was never in one home very long, and again, had no sense of being connected to the family. I was legally emancipated at the age of 13 and continued to bounce from house to house. In doing so, I became mesmerized by my family's wealth and prestige. They had many businesses and operations that brought them anything money could buy. I was taken by this illusion of ease and wealth, and it wasn't long before family let me in on their secret. All these businesses were fronts of smuggling drugs internationally and money laundering. My dad had built this dynasty, and I wanted in on the action, including the drugs and alcohol. I drank to fit in with the family. I drank to identify. I drank to not feel. I drank to be a part of something. When I say I drank, I mean I was drinking a fifth a day, at least. Mind you, I was only 13 years old at the time. My dope using increased as well, and it wouldn't be long before I would require more potent drugs so that I didn't have to feel, to the tune of about $1,000 a day habit on top of the fifth a day of whiskey. Given I was working for the family business that included transporting major high-end drugs across the country, my costly lifestyle was easy to support. While this lifestyle was easy to support, it included using women to try to fulfill my emotional needs that weren't met in healthy ways. I had never seen or was taught what a healthy relationship looked like or how one was supposed to work. I had never known what real love was or what being honest in a relationship looked like. What I had learned was how to be selfish, how to look out for number one, no matter the cost. And most of all, I learned how to survive. The entire time I was thinking that I was living a full life. Well, I moved home to Michigan to try and support my mom and my 2-year-old half-brother. I wanted to give my mom the lifestyle she deserved, so when I got back to Michigan, I connected with my other half siblings on my dad's side to do what our dad did best, selling drugs so I could take care of my mom. In recovery, we call this a geographical cure. And the funny thing about geographical cures is wherever you go, there you are. While my physical surroundings had changed, my habits, hurts, and hang-ups didn't. For example, while I was still in high school, I was making money, hand over fist, selling drugs, so I bought my first motorcycle. I remember I bought a Honda Nighthawk just to make me cool and special. While everybody else was riding bicycles and mopeds, I had a motorcycle. It only fed my ego and unhealthy lifestyle even more. Not only was I selling drugs to high-end clients, I was also driving limos and transporting my high-end clients. I was running with the big dogs, and I thought I was one of them. I thought I had respect, and running with the big dogs only brought me more money to buy more things so I could feel like I fit in and was a part of something. It would be at the age of 18 that I would begin my jail and prison history. I took a charge for the family, smuggling drugs across the border to show my loyalty. My family was so well respected and rich that my 2-year sentence was reduced to 2 years probation. Not facing consequences never did anyone any good. Since I was at home while on probation, this only perpetuated my addictive behaviors and my disease got worse. So my solution was another geographical cure to California. Since the first one was so successful. Sold all the things. Like I had literally spent at least $1 million and sold it for pennies. Packed what I could into a small U-Haul, grabbed my dog and headed to Cali. That was my MO. If I didn't like where I was at, tomorrow would be a different place with different people. I figured if I didn't get attached to anything, I wouldn't have to worry about anyone or anything abandoning me, hurting me, or using me. Funny thing is, though, wherever you go, there you are. And it didn't take long for my addictions to get to another deeper level. I had landed a job as a promotional model. I got paid to give away prizes at sporting events and for a very successful timeshare company with resorts all over the world. I was surrounded by musicians, movie stars, beautiful women, and it didn't take long before another geographical cure was needed. Insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. There wouldn't be a different result, however. Same stuff, different state. My own promotional company, connection with tattoo artists and biker clubs. I was a chameleon. I just changed into whatever character I needed to be. It wasn't long before I owed money to everyone, everywhere. I dodged responsibilities for years. With this move back to Michigan, I found out I had fathered 2 sons born a month and a half apart, and obviously with 2 different women. Everything in my life was temporary and disposable, including the women I was involved with. A longtime girlfriend of mine and I had also chosen twice to go the route of abortion around the same time these other 2 women were pregnant. I can't tell you or begin to describe the amount of regret and remorse I still have over this time in my life. I hadn't lived anywhere more than 6 months at a time for over 10 years. I was in and out of jail. I was out of control with my drug and alcohol use, even for an out-of-control drinker like me. I would explode on all my loved ones and was physically abusive, especially to women. I put people through total hell, and I was a gun-toting drunk and a high out-of-control maniac. In the late 90s, I found a new successful venue to make money so I could support my habits. It was music. I had the privilege of touring all over the country, hanging out with famous musicians, playing at various festivals, all the while selling drugs to support my habit. I couldn't support much else than my habits, however, because, we'd drink and drug all of our profits. I really hated God at this point. I hated Him and blamed Him for all that had happened to me when I was young. What I experienced with organized religion as a child left a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't have the good sense to know that, or that wasn't God, but people of organized religious institutions that had hurt me. All these habits, hurts, and hang-ups would continue until 2007 when I self-destructed. I was playing a gig in a biker bar at St. Patrick's Day, and I met a woman. She pursued me, and I was full-blown in love like I'd never been in love before. It would be her involvement in my life, along with her brother and her kids, that would change me forever. She was in recovery, along with her brother, and they attended a biker church. Tattooed bikers, recovery addicts, Heavy metal music in church? Wow. I wanted what they had and wasn't quite willing yet. She would ask me to go to church every weekend, and I would be too drunk or too sick to go. It'd be her 3-year-old that would spur on my willingness. He'd witnessed his grandmother falling down drunk, and his reply was, "Mommy, Grandma smells like Johnny." When his 3-year-old said that, something clicked for me. I remembered being that age, before all my power was stripped from me, being surrounded and abused by addicts, and the abuse that came from the people who I thought I could trust and looked up to, and just the absolute chaos and how it affected me. I was finally willing and even desired to quit using for good, but the problem was I couldn't physically do it. One night I went with my girlfriend to an annual festival, and we drank beer in a beer tent. The next morning I decided to go to church with her. And the biker church was under construction, so they were bouncing around, having services in parks and tents. You guessed it. We had church in the beer tent, and I spent the night drinking in it the night before. How odd, how God, right? I was touched and moved, and I cried and told my girlfriend and the man who prayed with me that it was time for me to come home. I would continue to struggle with my drinking, however, and I lost a relationship with my girlfriend. I was wrecked. I went on what would be my last binge. I partied insanely for a month straight. I couldn't stop using and drinking, nor could I numb the pain any longer. October 19th, 2007, I made a decision that suicide was my way out. In my mom's garage, I tried to hang myself. I had completed my task when out of nowhere, somehow something very clear and very real and very loud spoke to me. It was no choir of angels, no bright lights, and just what I believed it was God's voice saying, "Not like this." That was all. Just not like this. Somehow, I got out of the situation that I put myself in. I don't know how I got down from the rafters of the garage. I just simply don't know. All I knew was God spoke to me, and I listened for the first time to His will, not mine. I got a hold of my mom and little brother and asked them to commit me to the community mental health. I knew I needed and now desired to get help. My pain had reached a point that it was worse than my fear. And my mom and little brother, however, didn't want to take me because they didn't want to do that to me. What they didn't realize was they were literally loving me to death. I did take myself to CMH twice that weekend. However, because I hadn't been committed by my family member, they released me, and I couldn't find another place to get into. I wasn't about to give up, though. I needed help, and I was aware that I had some warrants for my arrest, so I tried to turn myself into the police department. The warrant hadn't been processed yet, so they wouldn't or couldn't arrest me. Go figure. The one time I needed or wanted to go to jail, and they wouldn't take me. I'd spend the next 5 days detoxing at home. I had the DTs, delirium tremors. I was in and out of the emergency room nearly dead from not drinking. I did find a place to take me in and to dry out and get the initial help for weeks. I puked, shook violently, had the runs, horrible nightmares, cramps, and pain beyond belief. But I didn't use. I did get sober, but I know that there was only one thing and one thing only that saved me. That was Jesus Christ. After hearing God's voice audibly in my suicide attempt and believing I was crazy, I went to a large church seeking some peace. I opted to go alone. You see, it was that still small voice in my head that night drawing me to Him. I had gone to this church a couple times when I was out there using. It was the only one I was familiar with, other than the biker church. It was the only church really where I felt safe. It wasn't where my girlfriend was, and it wasn't in a tent where I had drank the night before, and they didn't care what color I was, and which was pretty good because I was pretty green for a little while. Right there at that church that morning, all by myself, without anyone knowing, I'd have my full-blown surrender meltdown. I was on my knees asking God to relieve me of the bondage of self. I didn't know it yet, but I'd worked my first, second, and third step. I say this to a lot of folks in recovery. You can get on your knees on your own, or God will bring you to them for you. I always learn things the hard way, and this was no different. I was finally able to get into a local recovery center in Lansing, where I began AA-NA and was introduced to a program called Celebrate Recovery. A CR leader from a local church that had a functioning CR program on Thursday nights volunteered his time at this recovery center. So thank you to all those invested in outreach. When I left the recovery center, I went back to the girlfriend's house. After 5 days, she told me she didn't want me there anymore, didn't love me, and asked me to move out. I was wrecked, but I did not drink or use. I moved home to my mom's with my little brother, and my sobriety didn't mix with their party. But I did not use or drink. I was feeling unwanted and unloved, but I did not drink or use. I did start to attend this church where they celebrated recovery on Thursday nights, and the guy from the recovery center was there too. And again, I say thank God for people who serve and practice outreach. Okie. My recovery and church go hand in hand with each other in every way. I do have to share with you about my first formal CR meeting at the church. It was December of 2007, and I had taken the bus to church, and I just kind of showed up. I didn't know that the CR group maintained the serve or suffer mentality, and they were all serving at their annual outdoor program called the Christmas Journey. It was a journey through the woods that told the life story of Jesus from conception to his death, with an invitation to receive Christ at the end. I showed up, said I was there for Celebrate Recovery meeting, and I was told everyone was serving that night, and we weren't having a formal meeting. However, if I wanted to dress up as a townsperson of Bethlehem, I could serve with them and we could talk recovery in the woods. Next thing you know, I'm in the woods with a bunch of strangers leading a dysfunctional donkey named Jackie around. See, Jackie didn't like men. I didn't care though. I didn't care that I had stood in the cold at the bus stop to get to a meeting. I didn't care that I was with strangers. I didn't care that I was dressed up like a townsperson. Nor did I care that Jackie didn't like men. I was just willing to do absolutely anything to stay sober one more day. And I mean anything. I was living on my mom's couch, and I was selling blood to support myself. I made it to 147 meetings in 90 days after the treatment center. I stood at those bus stops in 25 degrees below zero, just to get to meetings. I was just willing to do whatever it took to keep and maintain what I had gained. The formula that works for me is God first, recovery second, and then myself. Without the first two, I don't have anything to offer anyone, including myself. Recovery doesn't work without a higher power. If you don't have a higher power, get one or borrow one until you get one. Mine is what I believe to be the one and only true higher power, Jesus Christ. All this was happening through Christmas and New Year's. In less than 2 months out of rehab, I was baptized and gave my testimony in my new CR home church. I was welcomed with wide open arms by my real family, my church family, my forever family. I was very involved with AA and CR, had sponsors, was working the steps. I auditioned and became part of the worship team there, doing fundraisers for inner city kids so they didn't end up like me. Life was finally getting healthy and serene. Drug money was still very tempting, and there would be those days where I felt like giving up, but I kept on. I did not use or drink, one day at a time. I was about 2 weeks from getting my driver's license back, obtaining an apartment that would be paid for 3 years, and having my education paid for as well, so I could get my GED and some college courses. It was all coming together, and my efforts of following God's will were starting to produce fruit when my world crashed. Excuse me. All the effort and willingness I'd put into my recovery since the suicide attempt was to prepare me for what was about to happen next. You see, I still had a secret. 5 years prior, in my $1,000 a day, fifth a day to a gallon a day habit of drugs and drinking, I committed a crime against another individual, taking away their power and security. I had a warrant out for my arrest. This time my arrest was very different though. For starters, I was and had been sober. I was working a program of rigorous honesty. I had a higher power and a great support team. I just did the next right thing. I turned myself in, accepted responsibility for the crime I had committed, and there were some untruths in the charges that were brought against me, and due to my violent past, I was not able to overcome those. I was sentenced to 9.5 to 41.5 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. I was bitter and angry at first. I had turned myself in, told the truth, and had accepted my responsibility for my actions. Ephesians 5:13. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes light. That is why it is said, "Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." To paraphrase that verse, that which light shines upon sometimes turns into light itself. All of my secrets have been exposed now, and I didn't have to drink or drug or deal with that. I had nothing more to hide and continued to work my program and steps even going into prison. It was difficult, very difficult, but with the same determination I had on the outside and with the same willingness to do whatever it takes, I was finally able to get sanctioned recovery meetings established on the inside. Step 9 says, made a direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. I could not make a direct amends to the one I had stolen power from, but what I could do is live in the light that shines on me and help other men to do the same, so that together we can make our communities a safer place for all. I stayed connected to my sponsors and accountability partners and with the powers that be within the prison system so that we could get as many guys to AA, NA, and Bible studies, and more importantly, was able to work from the inside out and getting many CR groups started in various prisons I was in. I was sent a leader guide and was able to train up other men who were willing to serve or suffer, and our persistence and perseverance paid off. Taking recovery into the prison system with me and having a forever family, God put me to work on the inside and then quickly through me released the light on the inside where darkness lived. This would not have been possible without the support of my home CR group. You know, the one with the donkey. Through their efforts and my persistence, we got CR materials into the facilities where I was locked up at. We, the other male prisoners, and I were able to sow God's grace into many men on the inside and change many men like me, the least of these, to glorify His name. I was in a total of 6 different institutions by the time I released. CR was in 9 because many men of God were raised up and continued to serve as they moved around. I was able to personally hand out over 450 CR Bibles on the yard, step studies, and open share groups. We were able to start CR in multiple prisons doing step studies and open share groups. Instead of passing on more generational sin, I, along with many others, passed on hope and healing from life's hurts, habits, and hang-ups. Many, many men, and more importantly, introduced men to their higher power, Jesus Christ. We made a difference in the prisons and our communities by helping men make better choices to allow God to change them from the inside out for the better. This is how I live out my 9th step, by making an indirect amends wherever I'm able. I could now see how God had used every geographical cure, every group of people I met, from the bikers to millionaires, to tattoo artists and musicians, to men living on the streets and alcoholics and addicts. He had me in those places with those people so that whoever entered the prison had the opportunity to connect with somebody they could relate to. This is called discipleship. 2 Corinthians 12:9-10 says, "But God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in weakness, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weakness, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, and in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong." By sharing my weakness with others, I did gain strength and respect, even with those in authority in the prison. I surprised them that I never received a ticket for poor, violent, or even unhealthy behavior. I came out of prison with a clean slate. Guards would come to me to interview between gangs or those in conflict to reflect the light and peace of Christ on the yard. By God's grace, I served in this manner for almost 10 years and then was released. God lifted 33 years of my prison sentence off me. I am forever grateful. Sometimes when I would be feeling rather weak and lonely, God would see fit to send me my forever family to visit with me. I had a few people from my church and CR that would visit as often as they were able. They would go the extra mile literally to ensure they brought my mom even. These people were my lifeline who lived out Scripture. Matthew 25, "The righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to you to visit you?" And the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." To all of you who wrote to me, contributed books and art supplies, sent me money, to those who visited me, especially those who did not forget me, I cannot express my gratitude enough. I did all that I could and then some to ensure that I served my time well and for my eventual release. Upon release, I was overwhelmed with the requirements of parole in order to transition into society, not to mention how much society had changed in 10 years. I had restrictions on the hours I could be away from my home, where I lived alone, and it felt like I was isolation. I had worked diligently to get the necessary permissions to attend my home CR group, but many I knew no longer attended the home group, and one person in authority within the church put me back on trial for wanting to get to a CR meeting. I did not expect this kind of adversity. It drove home some old issues of church hurt, abandonment, identity, and feelings that I wasn't good enough for the church. It was church hurt all over again, but I did not drink. I did not use anything but the steps and the truth in my support team, who rallied around me and journeyed with me again to meet the main pastor to bring light and truth to this matter. God continues to bring old fears for me and to face head on, and today I'm an overcomer. James 1:2-4 says, "Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith builds perseverance." I am humbled to share with you, I'm now able to attend my home CR group on a regular basis. I continue to stand for the truth in bringing darkness into light, so God continues to shine on me. And shine on me He has. Today I enjoy a good relationship with both my sons. I'm a grandpa to 5 beautiful grandkids who love to play music and wear hippie clothes. I bought a motorcycle and I began to ride again. I have a job where others returning from prison work as well. I have a home that is furnished. My support team still surrounds me and never once leaving my side. I was ordained while I was in prison, and in August of 2019 was asked by a friend to officiate her daughter's wedding. In October of this year, I celebrated 12 years of clean and sober. And November 21st of 2019, I was patched in as the first riding member of Broken Chains in the Lansing area. I have a desire to practice these principles in all my affairs and to carry the message of hope with me wherever God plants me. God has uniquely prepared me for serving prisoners, bikers, gangbangers, and others that most people can't even approach. Like Jeff Stoltz always says, I was a hopeless dope dealer who now has been given an incredible life, an opportunity to be a dopeless hope dealer. If God can change the least of these, like me, He can do it for you. I'm living proof. Thank you for letting me share.